I do not think anyone can deny the fact that almost all Thais benefit from water-orientated projects that His Majesty the King has initiated. Our presentation today is going to focus on certain water projects and His Majesty's working style, not only to illustrate how the theory of sufficiency economy is translated into practice, but also for the benefit of our future generations who should be spared the recurrence of water resource mismanagement.
During the beautiful Grand Royal Barge procession, the gilded Royal Barge Supanahong glitters in late afternoon sun, looking like a graceful golden swan that is gliding down the river. Following right behind is new Narai Song Suban, King Ram IX. The beauty is beyond description. Looking at the idyllic scene over the peaceful river, with water dripping from the golden paddles in the oarsmen's hands, we can't help but reminisce about the Lord of the land, protector of water resources. What I expect to see is a wider scope of development being systematically and gradually implemented. Some people might be led into thinking that I was deliberately stepping backward. All I can say is that I do not wish to see Thailand abruptly becoming one of the newly industrialized countries. Rather, my grave concern is over rural development, particularly irrigation and water resources development. Over the centuries, altogether 25 major river basins have been fed by innumerable tributaries, resembling arteries that carry water supply to all parts of the country. Situated in the southwest monsoon belt, Thailand normally has a 3-month rainy season that can bring such heavy rain as to cause inundations. Still, there have been periods of long dry spells too. With the absence of rain both during the rainy season and otherwise, the forest which used to cover the wide expanses of land helps release water stored underground, spreading moisture to watershed areas, which are sources of natural streams and ponds. With the availability of water, life can go on until the next rain comes. But with the fast depletion of the forest which used to serve as nature's water bank, coupled with the rapid population growth, both water sources and ancient water channels linking land and the sea have been encroached upon by the construction of roads and buildings as well as for agricultural purposes. The rest eventually becomes degraded and abandoned. Blocked water channels, in turn, prove detrimental to the people's way of life. Man-made disasters take the forms of flooding and drought, the effect of which has become more and more devastating, without regard for the crying and wailing on the part of those in plight. The only saviour capable of contending with the ill effects of such offence against water was the Lord of the land. The most important thing is the availability of water for consumption, general use and cultivation, because life relies on it. We can live if water is available. Without it, we cannot. Without electricity, we can. But without water, we cannot live. Early in His Majesty's reign, when government-supported and time-consuming construction of large dams was going on, His Majesty gave priority to small-sized reservoirs, which could be built within a year, but were instrumental in the royal efforts to bring help to as many of his subjects living in remote areas as possible.
A remote area was a place where in the dry season you could see only dust. Irrigation was badly needed there. For instance, with the construction of a reservoir or a check dam, the people's quality of life could be upgraded from having nothing to having enough to eat. So, you keep hearing the term used by His Majesty over and over again, to have enough to eat. has been repeated for a long period of time. Must be more than 2 decades, I think.
Starting out with accelerated projects for small reservoirs to store water for general use, Royal-initiated projects were expanded to cover a number of multiple constructions of middle-sized reservoirs in all parts of the country, along with irrigation channels, which together form a network thousands of kilometres long. The objectives are to upgrade the people's quality of life from having enough to eat to living well and eating well. The major source of information is large maps which His Majesty always carries around with him. These maps not only contain geographical data relating to the width, length and altitude applying in each location, but also serve as a mobile encyclopedia with references on water-related records, firstly, the dates and times, and secondly, locations of past disasters caused by floods and droughts.
I can tell you about the time a soldier approached me, asking if I knew where Hoi Rai was. I said yes, so they took me in a car with them. The moment we got out the car, I heard voices over the radio transmitter. The king is coming. The soldiers had not said anything, but I could figure it out. They told me he was due in 5 minutes and asked if I could give them a hand removing the log. As soon as the log was removed, the king drove up to the spot, opened the door, got out and walked ahead very fast. I was panting trying to catch up with him, but then I was completely out of breath. Now something astonishing happened. The king stopped walking and started looking at his maps, then said, as if he already knew, "So many million cubic meters here, so many million cubic meters over there. This must be the site for it." While he was pinpointing the spot, I thought, what million cubic meters? It was forest all around, on high ground. All I could see was hard, dry soil, gravels, no water in sight. Well, within 2 months after that, the ground was levelled. All machinery, equipment was there. Pretty soon we could see the outline of a reservoir. Today, people in Tham Mueang district have tap water facility which is supplied by our Hoi Rai reservoir right here.
Even though the main cause of the lush green mountain forest cannot be attributed to the abundant rainfall, it is the lush green forest that helps retain soil moisture and soil nutrients. Many royal-initiated reservoirs do not have to rely solely on the rainy season for the supply of water, but receive it also from higher rehabilitated watershed sources, which had earlier degraded due to severe forest encroachments. Rehabilitation of degraded forest has found itself in the list of His Majesty's areas of grave concern. This gave rise to a series of royal-initiated reforestation theories, one of which became known internationally, namely the check dam theory. On one of the royal visits to northern Thailand, a Hmong hill tribe's small irrigation device caught His Majesty's attention. The approach was simple and cheap and implemented as an experiment to rehabilitate 8,500 rai of degraded forest at Hoi Hong Krai Royal Development Study Centre.
His Majesty explained that the soil there was dry and of low quality, gravel mixed and no water source nearby. Besides, there was a problem of forest fire. You can imagine that no one would want such barren wasteland.
But it was not so with the king, who saw it as a challenge. As it happened, more than 500 of the small check dams were built at intervals in the area to reduce the velocity of rainwater flow. Through the method, a wide area of parched soil gradually becomes moist and saturated with time. In the end, degraded forest becomes lush and green once more.
In any development work, the core factor is water source. His Majesty's approach was designed to retain water within the forest area for as long as possible. Check dams are built to block small streams in watershed areas.
Illegal forest encroachment, which sometimes occurred out of ignorance, is still going on, but the imminent harm has not materialized due to the effectiveness of royal-initiated forest development and rehabilitation projects, which has been implemented using different methods in various parts of the country. During one of the royal trips by air to visit his subjects in the northeast in 1955, His Majesty noticed large masses of clouds in his flight path as he reached Kutbak district, Sagon Nakhon province, but they were not enough to cause rainfall. That inspired him to devise a scientific technique so that clouds would build up and produce rain. If the technique proved successful, the solution for water shortages would come full circle, from the sky to the soil.
His Majesty remarked to Version+Eng Subtitles, a civil servant working with the then Department of Rice Crop, Ministry of Agriculture, who was trained as an agricultural engineer. His Majesty also gave him some books on the subject of rainmaking, so that further study and research could be conducted.
Research on rainmaking took 14 years. In 1969, the first rainmaking test was performed over Khao Yai National Park, Bak Chong District, Nakhon Ratchasima Province. So far, there have been altogether 6 royal-initiated formulas of rainmaking chemicals. These can be seen as off-white streaks across the sky trailing the royal rainmaking planes. At the command given through the radio transmitters, a fleet of 3 or 4 planes began its cloud agitation and bombardment missions. Economizing as much as possible according to His Majesty's policy, the airborne operation to force it to rain has been completed with success. The royal rain solves the critical problems of drought and alleviates the people's hardship.
It's a private royal undertaking whereby everybody must heed His Majesty's advice and suggestion. My role is in the area of coordination, to make sure every team member understands. Otherwise, they might think they could design their own work and working style.
The ill effects of man-made disasters resulting in loss of nature's equilibrium have been considerably alleviated thanks to His Majesty the King's perseverance and determination. But they could reoccur if the past lessons were unheeded. The threat of water shortages can always come around again any time.
As often happens in our country, not long after we are faced with problems caused by long dry spells, which can lead to severe water shortages, another kind of problem ensues: flooding. What is undeniable is the connection between these two correlative extremes, both of which reflect a change in geographical and climate conditions as well as the extent of urban and rural development. In all of Thailand, there are only very few specialists or experts with profound knowledge and understanding of these matters.
The main concept of water resource development is management, how to control both its volume and quality. In other words, when the volume becomes excessive, appropriate preventive measures must be imposed to timely drain away floodwaters to avoid damages. On the other hand, in the face of water shortages, provisions are needed to ensure sufficient water supply and quality suitable for cultivation, industry, consumption and household use. Bangkok and its perimeter can be caught up in a flooding situation if attacked by floodwaters from the north flowing down the Chao Phraya River, floodwaters from the east, seawater and rainwater. In 1978, floodwaters from the north overflowed the Chao Phraya banks. Bangkok metropolis was inundated as a result. The authority at the time focused the flood prevention scheme only to protect the inner city. 2 years later, the attack was from the east, which caught the authority by surprise. In fact, no measures had been thought out then.
Things went on like that for about 2 or 3 months. Always keeping abreast of current affairs, His Majesty saw no trace of a solution and so called us in for an audience.
Subsequent to the flooding of 1980, His Majesty suggested that embankments be built to block the flow of floodwaters from the east. North-south water diversion channels be built to divert water from north of Bangkok southward, and also create or reserve green areas free of big constructions, which may encroach on waterways. No further steps had been taken. In 1983, Bangkok metropolis was once again subject to heavy flooding.
That was a major war indeed. His Majesty had to personally supervise and monitor every step. For instance, the drainage system, or the methodologies involved. In 1983, royal inspection was conducted by helicopter. His Majesty paid visits to the Royal Irrigation Department team during the construction of water gates, giving his moral support, inspecting things, urging those government officials to work out a solution to alleviate flood problems in Bangkok and its perimeter.
It was in 1983 that the accelerated construction of eastern embankments got underway along the guidelines His Majesty had given 3 years earlier.
In 1985, the year of 1,000-year reign, the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration, under the leadership of Major General Chamlong, was able to rapidly drain away floodwaters. But that was not entirely their doing. Rather, the rapid drainage was facilitated by all royally initiated constructions plan of 1982-83.
The Royal Flood Management initiatives include a subsequent preventative measure of blocking off the inner city by raising the level of all roads close to the Chao Phraya River by 20 to 40 centimetres, starting from the mouth of Rangsit Canal all the way through to Nonthaburi, passing Sam Sen and Bang Su canals to Samut Prakan province to divert floodwaters out to sea.
The embankment roads were built along the Chao Phraya River. If you notice the low water level in the main canals, you will see that heavy rains no longer cause heavy flooding nowadays, not even when the water level in the Chao Phraya rises at high tide. The key factor lies in the water gates built at the mouths of main canals to regulate the in- and outflow of water.
The government itself has come up with a flood prevention plan for the Bangkok metropolis and its perimeter. The plan, called the Chao Phraya 2, involves digging to avoid meanderings.
His Majesty was of the opinion that Chao Phraya 2 would accelerate the drainage of fresh water, good water, into the sea, which would be detrimental rather than beneficial to the country as far as agriculture is concerned. So, to solve the flooding problem, one should not concentrate on water drainage alone. All must be taken into account.
In normal circumstances, Chao Phraya River has a holding capacity of only 2,500 cubic meters of water per second, so any excess volume becomes floodwater. Instead of digging the river for drainage purposes, His Majesty suggested the construction of Basak Jolasid Storage Dam to contend with the excess volume of water. That was part of the Royal Flood Management initiatives, which prove also beneficial to the people from Saraburi, all the way down to Rangsit district of the Bangkok metropolis. The face of water scarcity.
Sometime later, His Majesty made an observation on bad, i.e. polluted water, prevailing in the Bangkok metropolis. The royal theory was to use fresh water from the Pasak Cholasit Dam to flush out and dilute the polluted water via Rapipat Canal all the way to Laxi Canal.
As for floodwaters from the east originating from Khao Yai via Nakhon Nayok, the problem could be solved through the construction of the Tadan Dam, a project which His Majesty has already initiated in 1976. Its primary function is to solve acidic soil problems prevailing in Nakhon Nayok province. As it turned out, the dam provides an indirect service as a large-size Gam Ling, a storage reservoir for the Bangkok metropolis.
His Majesty remarked that I had dealt with only one aspect of the problem, namely how to protect the inner city from the floods, and ignored all others. But His Majesty said he had to be aware of a 100-fold problem as to what could the impact of the solution be and how would the solution impact the people and things, for instance.
Version+Eng is another area directly impacted by floodwaters from the east. His Majesty remarked on the necessity of having an express floodway to release floodwaters out to sea.
The BMA is currently in the process of building such a floodway, which, on account of the local conditions, may not be feasible above ground, so we might have to opt for an underground floodway, but the project is being worked on.
The period in 1995, starting from the lengthy hospitalization of the Princess Mother all the way through to her funeral rites, saw an interrupted number of His Majesty's flood management initiatives at work in the Bangkok metropolis and its perimeter. There was an instance when the royal intention involved a multi-purpose ground for recreation or cooking purposes for the people living on Charon Nakhon Road along the Chao Phraya River, who had been heavily flooded because their houses happened to be right behind the flood embankment line.
If I may use the word displeased, it might be the first time ever that His Majesty was displeased. At any rate, I sensed it when I received a call from one of the court officials to the effect that His Majesty desired to know whether the multi-purpose ground would be built. If not, His Majesty would undertake to build it himself.
The repurposed ground rapidly took shape as a result, although nobody had quite grasped His Majesty's real intention.
I subsequently had an audience with him, during which he said those people were in trouble. How could we disrupt their lives and simply brush aside the consequences, saying, "Too bad, you just carry on as usual, we are compelled to put up the embankments here anyway"? His Majesty said, "This can't be right. We have to let them know that we care, that we are concerned."
Looking at the numerous royal flood management initiatives, a methodology that His Majesty has initiated to both manage floodwaters as well as relieve water scarcity is the so-called Gam Ling project. The monkeys, which the Princess Mother gave to her children to raise when they were young, proved a great source of inspiration to His Majesty's flood management initiatives that saved the Bangkok metropolis. His Majesty translated the monkey's habit of hoarding bananas in its pout cheek before bringing them out to chew and swallow later into practice known as the Gam Ling projects. The system involves storage of excess water from floods and drainage to relieve water shortages in the dry season. The first Gam Ling project is the King Rama IX Storage Reservoir project. To receive and store water flowing down Chao Phraya River, water from this project is used to dilute polluted water in Bangkok, as well as nurture cultivation in the lower central plains. Some of the royal-initiated Gam Ling projects came into existence by accident. For example, the pond surrounding the statue of Somdet Phra Si Suryatai, which occupies a space of over 150 rai, built as a proactive measure against possible future flooding.
At the time, the area around the statue was badly inundated by floodwaters from Nakhon Sawan. His Majesty decided to have the team from the Bureau of the Royal Household open up a few openings in the wall around the statue to allow water to flow in and flood over the area. Do you know why? There were hundreds and thousands of electronics factories in the neighborhood. If these had been inundated, the damage would have been estimated at tens of billions of baht. So, water was stored there for the people's use later.
เป็นหมื่นล้านตรงนั้นแล้วกักน้ำนั้นไว้เอามาใช้เมื่อประชาชนต้องการ
Towards the end of 1988, many areas in the south, particularly in Hat Yai district, became suddenly and severely inundated after flash floods and heavy rains. Such serious flood condition, which prevailed over a long period of time, was caused by the urban development, which obstructed the flow of water out to the sea.
Land expropriation had to be imposed in order to retrieve natural waterways and turn them into floodway. In short, an additional drainage channel had to be dug north of Hat Yai municipality.
The flood management plan for Hat Yai had been completed, but the rough spot of land expropriation stage had still to be ironed out. Thus, project implementation had been put on the back burner until 2000, when heavy flooding recurred.
A royal, stern rebuke was administered, with His Majesty demanding to know what had delayed the implementation after he had allocated specific assignments. But the rebuke was not directed at the royal irrigation people, because he knew exactly what the obstacles had been. This led me to thinking perhaps our management system left something to be desired.
Located in bowl-shaped marshland, Hat Yai receives floodwaters from water from the south that overflows the banks of Utapao Canal, water flowing down Kar Hong Hill to the east of the city and then along Pechkasem Highway, a virtual water channel in times of flooding.
The plan drafted by the Royal Irrigation Department was based on His Majesty's initiatives. A drainage channel was to be built to block water entering the city area and provide an alternative passage of water, just like bypass in the context of road system.
Such bypass was enhanced by a network of drainage canals that circled the city of Hat Yai, through which floodwaters drained into Songkla Lake. The key concept to solving the flood problem is to understand the basic nature of water so as to control the direction of its flow according to the situation applying at the time. The delay mainly stemmed from lack of understanding on one side and lack of cooperation between the government sector and the people on the other side.
I dare say that the long and short of the delay lies in the properties to be expropriated. The people were willing to give up their land, but the criteria for deciding the amount to be compensated to them were as yet problematic. I want to tell you that, at times, people have questions as to fair treatment, rules and regulations and the like. There are still misunderstandings.
With His Majesty's fundamental understanding of the nature of water, coupled with his sufficiency economy concept, a full integration of water management methodologies has been materialized in continued consideration of possible effects on all concerned. They are the methodologies that represent the core concept and lessons to be learned in the context of future development if past errors are to be avoided and if the concept of sufficiency is to be effectively put to practice nationwide.
In the area of flood prevention, I am sure we Bangkokians, and perhaps all Thais, can't help but feeling eternal gratitude to His Majesty. Given the innumerable quantitative water-orientated projects which have so far been initiated by His Majesty, his undertakings seem endless still, because an array of problems relating to bad quality of water or polluted water is awaiting royal intervention and solution.
His Majesty's theory on wastewater treatment dated back to 1984, when foul, stagnant Makassan Lake was emitting a rank stench in the heart of Bangkok. His Majesty initially applied a simple remedial method of diluting polluted water with good water. Subsequently, the method changed to using evil to fight evil, i.e. using the roots of water hyacinth to filter out toxins and heavy metals contained in wastewater. This went on until 1988, when bad water became worse due to the people's habit of discarding refuse and wastes into natural water sources and waterways.
His Majesty often voiced his grave concern over worsening water pollution problems in urban areas and suggested that wastewater treatment had to be started to remedy the situation.
To treat wastewater, His Majesty initiated a mechanical device to add oxygen to water, namely an aerator. A team of researchers submitted 9 aerator models to His Majesty. On the 9 models, only 2 prove effective and suitable to the nature of domestic water sources. One is Model 2, known as the Chai Patna aerator, which was derived from look or water wheel, used widely by Thai farmers. And the other is Model 5 or RX5C, a sketch of which was faxed to the team by His Majesty personally. This aerator uses a submerged propeller to agitate the water, thereby enhancing aeration for the water below.
These models are tested for wastewater treatment appropriate to different areas. Some are designed for use along with a water wheel in larger ponds measuring more than 1.5 meters in depth, while some are meant for shallower ponds.
Another large-scale wastewater treatment system initiated by His Majesty involves wastewater collection from municipal area, which is conveyed to a pumping station located on a large open space outside the communities. The method combines lagoon treatment with grass filtration, whereby the roots of a number of grasses were selected according to each locality, filter and cleanse the water released from the polishing pond. The methodologies for this were adapted from an Australian model.
Of course, we use the plants that grow in our country. Only the pattern has been adapted. In the West, they call it constructed wetland.
Nong Han is one of the larger sized water sources in Thailand and the main artery nurturing Sakon Nakhon. It supplies fresh water to the Waterworks Authority as well as serves as a freshwater fish breeding station. Originally, wastewater has been treated at Nong Sanom before it was drained into Nong Han. The treatment there, however, was only 30% effective. By all indications, rapid urban growth in Sakon Nakhon province was soon to bring future pollution to Nong Han. His Majesty enlisted the service of the government sector to construct a wastewater treatment system using stabilization ponds in an area of 92 rai on the bank of Nong Han.
The process involves collecting wastewater from urban communities and conveying it through drain pipes to the stabilization ponds.
The Sakon Nakhon system has presently spread to other parts of the country. Further tests and experiments are conducted by the Royal-initiated Lam Prak Beer Environmental Research and Development Project, which collects wastewater from urban areas in Phetchaburi province.
His Majesty remarked that the wetland theory worked on the same principle as Gamling, which is designed to temporarily store water to prevent flooding. But its secondary function is to treat wastewater, using water plants to absorb toxins and pollutants. But these plants discarded cannot be used as animal feed. They are good for making compost.
We have seen how equilibrium is replenished to nature. The methods of fulfilling what is missing, using good water to flush out wastewater, treating wastewater through filtration by water plants, oxygenating by mechanical aeration, and combining lagoon treatment with gas filtration are all components of natural treatment processes which His Majesty has initiated. Before success could be achieved, the undesirable sights and smells emitted from polluted water sources have all been experienced by His Majesty in person.
The examples cited have to do with water management theories which His Majesty has been a major part. Certain projects come into being at His command, not just His initiations which left room for your own thinking. In cases where the outcome did not meet His Majesty's expectation, the more correct words are at His decree, something like a royal rebuke.
Narai Songsuban, King Rama IX, graced the idyllic River of Kings, leading the royal bard Supanahong in the long procession of traditional vessels, a live testimony of world history being watched and witnessed. It takes a great nation and people with unusual water-orientated expertise to whip up such a spectacle for all to see. Even if the spiritual bonds between man and water seem to be missing at a certain point in time among the younger generations, it is not too late to link up with this natural, life-giving element, again through the virtues of compassion and conservation, as His Majesty has illustrated over the years.
The profundity and sagacity evident in the royal-initiated projects related to water are of a magnitude that cannot be touched upon its entirety, given our time constraint. But at least we have presented to you a demonstration of His Majesty's vision, how He perceives a problem, His systematic solution for short, medium and long terms. As regards to quantitative aspect, we have witnessed small, medium and mega-sized projects which are methodically integrated in the end. His Majesty's solution to a problem always takes into consideration the true conditions applying in our country. We all need to know and fully understand the royal initiations, because they always relate to our living, no matter at what end of development we are standing, because water is life.